Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished panelists, colleagues and friends, a wonderful Sunday morning to you all, and a real special welcome to those who stayed at the party tonight till after 1 or 2 o'clock. Even on the panel I found out there are colleagues really who enjoyed last night's evening. Thank you for joining us in our session entitled Amazon Fund, from result-based payment to the experiences on the ground. This discussion forum is organized by the Amazon Fund, which is managed by the Brazilian Development Bank, and here represented by Juliana Santag. Juliana. On behalf of our host, I would like to extend the most cordial welcome to all of you. My name is Helmut Eger. I'm from the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, and I have the pleasure of facilitating this discussion forum, which will look at the purpose of the Amazon Fund to contribute to a sustainable development model for the Amazon region. We will start this morning with a video about the Amazon Fund, and consider this, especially those who went to bed late, as a soft landing for you all.
The Amazon is one of our most important environmental assets. It encompasses the largest hydrographic basin in the world. It is home to rich biodiversity, and it plays a crucial role in the rain patterns on our continent and in the climatic balance on the planet. Some 25 million people also live in the region, including traditional populations such as indigenous tribes, descendants from former slave communities known as quilombolas, river dwellers and those who live off the forest, and many of them live in protected areas. For example, indigenous land and environmental conservation units. Brazil is proud to have significantly reduced deforestation in its area of the Amazon. This decrease is one of the main contributions across the world towards countering climate change. One Brazilian initiative that has contributed to this result is the Amazon Fund, which invests in projects aimed at combating deforestation and reinforcing the sustainable use of the forest. The BNDES manages the Amazon Fund in cooperation with the Ministry of the Environment. One of the largest development banks in the world, the BNDES is responsible for raising and allocating resources, as well as monitoring projects that receive support. Both governments and companies can make donations to the fund. Here are some of the projects receiving support from the Amazon Fund.
Instituto Melhor, nós temos conjunto de ações voltadas para o manejo florestal comunitário, a proteção ambiental e também componente de monitoramento, no sentido de se as ações realizadas no projeto estão tendo o impacto previsto.
Graças a Deus, todas as crianças, se você mandar ela plantar, ela planta, ela sabe plantar. Mas o que o projeto traz para a gente é um conhecimento a mais.
Eles bastante contribuem com a informação na parte da área de agricultura.
É muito importante esses agentes como educadores ambientais, como pessoas que fazem um trabalho de sensibilização com suas comunidades, visando principalmente prevenir que o crime ambiental aconteça. Ele é mais uma liderança, é mais um instrumento, uma ferramenta que vem para a comunidade, para junto com ela cuidar do recurso natural. É muito importante que exista o Fundo Amazônia, né, no sentido de beneficiar principalmente quem vive na floresta e quem precisa da floresta.
Então, o cadastro ambiental rural, né, que é um instrumento que foi criado pelo novo Código Florestal, ele possibilitou uma virada de página na regularização ambiental.
Quase a totalidade dos imóveis rurais do Acre estão na base de acompanhamento do órgão ambiental.
Ele veio para criar um instrumento mais ágil, que pudesse estar trazendo também alguns benefícios que possibilitaria, né, esse produtor poder pagar o seu passivo, né, proteger as águas e também ter uma reserva legal produtiva.
Nós temos como um caso emblemático o sítio Nova Jerusalém, de propriedade do seu Geraldo. Analisamos qual era a situação ambiental do seu imóvel, o que estava, né, em déficit ambiental, ou seja, o que faltava para ele cumprir a legislação. Ele assinou um compromisso de regularizar e, com isso, né, a propriedade do seu Geraldo obteve o desembargo ambiental e, inclusive, a regularização da multa ambiental.
Primeiro eu recebi o cadastro, né? Daí uns dias eu já recebi também o desembargo, né? Fiz o projeto, já consegui o crédito pelo banco.
Quando o Fundo Amazônia abriu a oportunidade de apoiar projetos de implantação do Cadastro Ambiental Rural e do Programa de Regularização Ambiental, nós conseguimos obter os resultados que hoje está se tornando até referência no país.
E um dos projetos mais importantes que a gente tem aqui no IB é o Programa de Monitoramento da Amazônia.
Existem muitas teorias sobre o desmatamento, ele é feito para a área de pastagem, mas ninguém tinha isso comprovado numericamente.
Quando começa uma fiscalização mais efetiva, esses grandes desmatamentos eles começam a diminuir.
Apesar de a gente ter esses atores de desflorestamento, a gente tem cerca de 20% de área entrando em regeneração.
Aqui no Brasil, nós somos em torno de 3.000 achaninca.
Tem um trabalho que a gente vem desenvolvendo desde 1989, né, que é um trabalho de recuperar, de restaurar todos os danos causados aqui pela exploração de madeira, desmatamento para criação de pastagem, com o manejo de fauna silvestre, né, a recuperação dos rios. Nós plantamos aqui dentro quase 1 milhão de mudas, né, entre aqui e fora do território agora.
Foi importante saber que ali estava o Fundo Amazônia, e o Fundo Amazônia estava dialogando exatamente com o que a gente estava fazendo nesses últimos 20 anos, que era lutar para a floresta ficar de pé, recuperar.
E hoje tem sido levado o modelo que nós temos desenvolvido aqui na comunidade e no centro de Orencantame, também para outros municípios, para outros estados. E é esse ponto que nós estamos querendo alcançar perante ao mundo, dizer que índio não sabe de nada. Eu acho que é muito poucas pessoas que entendem como o índio sabe viver, né?
Nós temos algo em torno de 500 mil famílias de assentados de reforma agrária na Amazônia. Então, o trabalho do IPAM está focado no sentido de criar um ambiente econômico onde essas famílias possam prosperar.
Sem essa gestão ambiental, fica quase impossível do agricultor, porque ele vem, no primeiro momento, ele pensa em produzir, aí ele acaba desmatando, degradando sem o conhecimento, né?
Até que eu já fiz umas coisas meio erradas, porque foi derrubar a mesma mata, mas a gente tem que sobreviver. Aí apareceu gente aqui do IPAM, atrás de mim. Depois daí pra cá foi onde eu planejei, né?
Com a presença dos técnicos aqui, se começa um processo de reconstrução, né? As atividades produtivas, os cursos, as oficinas, faz com que o agricultor tenha uma perspectiva.
O encontro do IPAM com o Fundo Amazônia se dá justamente por essa convergência da missão das duas instituições, reduzir e, se tudo der certo, terminar com o desmatamento na Amazônia.
Para nós foi como mudar da ossada para o filé, né? Nos ajudou mais a desenvolver mais, estão mais presentes.
A gente sempre sonhava, né, numa reserva, porque a gente sempre sonhou em preservar e garantir o futuro.
E eu acredito, se para mim foi bom, que sou agricultor, para todos os agricultores no estado do Acre, isso é ótimo.
E hoje, assim, da onde eu vim, eu vejo que tá vindo abrir outro mundo.
Aí eu acredito que é só melhorar mais.
E a gente espera que essa recuperação não seja restaurado só a terra, mas a consciência também do ser humano que destrói tudo isso, né?
The Amazon Fund. Brazil protects it. The world supports it. Everybody wins. BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank.
Ladies and gentlemen, after this video, the short awakeness test. Who of the panelists showed up in the video? Nobody? Wow, yeah, okay. Osvaldo was in the video. Thank you, you passed the test. After this introduction, I would like to present our panelists to you. They represent some of the institutions with lots of experiences in working with traditional communities in the Amazon region, and also they carry out important projects supported by the Amazon Fund. I would like to start with Adriana Ramos. Adriana is the director of the Policy and Law Program of the Socioambiental Institute, a Brazilian non-governmental institution working on integrated solutions to social and environmental issues. She is also, and that is very important in this context of the implementation of the Amazon Fund, she is the civil society representative in the guidance committee of the Amazon Fund. Now, to the gentleman with the tie. In the movie, you saw him without tie, Osvaldo Stella. He is the director. Osvaldo is the director of the Amazon Environmental Research Institute, where Osvaldo leads projects on sustainable settlements. The gentleman without tie, Virgilio Viana, is the director. Virgilio is the director of the Sustainable Amazon Foundation, an institution dedicated to conserving the forest and improving the welfare of nearly 600 communities in the state of Amazonas. He is also a member of the World Economic Forum and other important regional and international institutions. Amy Duchelle is a scientist at the Center of International Forestry Research, CIFOR, in Indonesia. And prior to moving to Indonesia, she worked for CIFOR in Brazil, focusing on forest-based climate change mitigation and smallholder and community forest management. This morning, we will start with a presentation of the Amazon Fund by Juliana Santiago. Juliana heads the Amazon Fund department at the Brazilian Development Bank. Before that, she was in charge of projects in areas such as waste management, sanitation, urban infrastructure, and social inclusion. After Juliana's presentation, we will have a discussion in 2 rounds with our distinguished panelists, and then we open for questions from the audience. Please, if you have questions, write down the questions, also questions to the presentation what Juliana will give to you, and we will present them to our panelists. Our colleagues Ulla and Esther will collect your questions throughout the discussion. Juliana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helmut. Thank you to the audience and to our distinguished panelists to be with us this morning and to have selected our discussion forum. Among so many discussion forums we are having this morning with so interesting themes related to forest and land use. I will briefly present to you the Amazon Fund. an initiative of the Brazilian government and society to support the implementation of actions to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. In the past years, we could observe a significant reduction in deforestation rates in the Amazon region. Deforestation has been cut by 80%, and Brazil is now the largest reducer of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. As a pioneer initiative to reward results obtained by Brazil in REDD+, the fund was formally established in 2008, having the government of Norway announcing a commitment to contribute with $1 billion to the fund. Today, the Amazon Fund has donations to the tune of $1 billion, having donations from Norway, from the German government through its KfW, and from the Petrobras, the Brazilian oil and gas company. Plus, last Monday, we have a very important announcement to forests with a specific a new pledge of 600 million euros announced from Norway to be transferred to the fund up to 2020. And in last August, the German government, in an official visit to Brazil by the Chancellor Merkel, also announced a new pledge to the fund of 100 million euros. In the 6 years of operation, the Amazon Fund is considered well-positioned in comparison to other climate funds worldwide, and as example to be followed. And very often, we listen to this question: why does it work? Well, we consider that these are the 3 pillars of the Amazon Fund's success. The first pillar is country ownership. Development does not take place unless it is achieved by the country itself, which requires that the government has sufficient support among stakeholders within and outside the government, and has the ability to implement its development strategy. The turning point in Brazil's efforts to curb deforestation was the implementation of the National Strategic Plan to prevent and combat deforestation in the Amazon, called by the acronym PPC DONE. This policy is based in these 3 axes: land use and territorial planning, monitoring and environmental control, and the promotion of sustainable production activities. It's worth to mention that the Amazon Fund is additional to a series of national efforts in reducing deforestation. Projects supported by the fund have to be connected with the national policy in one of these 3 axes, plus a 4th axis of scientific and technological development, which we consider transversal to all. The second pillar is governance structure. The dialogue with public policymakers and civil society has been a decisive factor in the evolution of the fund. The fund has a participatory governance through a guidance committee that is represented by people from the federal government ministries, from the governments of the Amazonian states, and from civil society and the scientific community. This committee is responsible for setting the guidelines and priorities of the resources applications based on deforestation dynamics and priorities to curb deforestation set by the public policies. The Brazilian Development Bank is the manager of the fund. Our team is responsible for raising donations, analyzing and approving the project's applications for financial support, tracking and monitoring the implementation of the supported projects, and reporting the results and impacts achieved. Last, the technical committee is composed of leading specialists with renowned technical and scientific knowledge and has the mission of verifying carbon emissions avoided by reduced deforestation in the Amazon, and to attest the fundraising limit of the fund, which has reached approximately $19 billion up to 2014 certified results. Transparency is the third pillar of the Amazon Fund. We have a very comprehensive website where stakeholders might find all sorts of information about the fund, including updated information about activities already implemented by the projects, portfolio reports, new bulletins, etc. We also prepare annual reports with a lot of information about results of the fund and impacts of the projects. And the fund is submitted to the exam of certified public auditors who issue reports on the financial information and of the compliance of the project supported to the rules and regulations of the fund and also to the guidelines established by the steering committee. Those auditor reports are also in our website. And now our portfolio. Over the last 6 years, the Amazon Fund has provided support to 77 projects in the total amount of approximately $500 million. It is important to mention that those are the projects that are already committed and does not include the ones that are still under analysis by our team. Now, I will share with you some of the highlights of the projects we support. Support to indigenous people is one of the priorities of the Amazon Fund. An important amount of $44 million has already been committed to support indigenous populations, plus an extra important budget will be destined to projects that has been selected in a call to submission that took place early this year, and that aims to implement the indigenous territorial plans and an important step of the national policy designed to protect and support the indigenous people. Those projects involve activities related to planning and territorial control, environmental management, the development of sustainable production activities, and protecting uncontacted people. This map is very interesting. In the brown areas, you can see the indigenous land in the Amazon region. As you can see, each colored dot corresponds to one project supported by the Amazon Fund. And we have so far supported a significant number of indigenous lands. The expectation is that in the near future, even more areas will be covered because this map does not include the projects that are still under analysis by our team. Under the Brazilian law, 80% of the area of each rural establishment in the Amazon must be protected. However, uncertainty regarding land titles in the Amazon is strongly related to deforestation. An important step for holding individuals accountable for illegal deforestation is to identify who owns or possesses the land. Although the rural registration environmental registration, known as CAR, does not promote land regularization, it associates individuals to territories. It is a key instrument to assist in the environmental regularization of rural properties and possessions. The Amazon Fund has a portfolio of 13 projects to support CAR, with approximately $100 million earmarked to establish the central policy of environmental governance. One of the challenges that we have faced these past years was how the resources may reach the ground and local institutions. The strategy that has been shown appropriate is to support partner institutions which have a more robust governance and articulations with local organizations, and also historical and solid presence in working with traditional communities. And through these partners, we can reach local entrepreneurs and individuals that live in the forest. Although most part of the Amazon is within the Brazilian territory, the forest goes beyond our borders, across other South American countries. Up to 20% of the Amazon Fund resources may support the development of deforestation monitoring capacity of other Brazilian biomes and other tropical forested countries. So this project has the objective to build the capacity to other Pan-Amazonian countries to monitor their forest cover. Talking about results. The protected areas and the indigenous land are crucial to retain the deforestation pressure. The impact of the Amazon Fund support to these areas and the people that live in these territories are significant. The Amazon Fund has supported the strength of various institutions that leads important control activities to combat illegal actions, such as the National Environmental Agency, the National Intelligence Force, among others. As a priority established by the Guidance Committee, a significant number of properties have already been enrolled in the rural registration system with the support of the Amazon Fund. Some of the results verified here are linked to the efforts to focus on activities that reach the ground. The traditional populations are also mobilized to monitor and report any deforestation or other illegal actions. Supporting projects that allow a sustainable management of the forest and create employment and income alternatives to deforestation is crucial to the forest worth more standing than cut down. Some results so far on this branch is to support research in deforestation dynamics and mapping social technologies, as well as the improvement of deforestation monitoring systems. As a significant number of researchers are involved in these activities, we are building a capacity of thinking strategically and how to influence by the academy the decisions of the policymakers. In its first 6 years of operation, the Amazon Fund so far has succeeded to achieve very significant results, a journey with constant challenges and learning gains, where the dialogue with the public and civil society actors has been a decisive factor in the progress of the fund. But combating deforestation also has to be aligned with simultaneously fostering more efficient use of the land so that rural economic growth also protects the environment. Actions with a territorial perspective are crucial to keep the positive results. It is not possible to consider the territory in a segmented way. It is necessary to understand the differences and how to integrate the positive actions that work in an indigenous land, in a settlement, in a protected area. So I now leave the floor to our distinguished panelists who will bring to you some of their experiences of protecting the Amazon with the participatory engagement of the traditional communities that live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliana. Your presentation gave us a panoramic view of the Amazon Fund, showing that this is already a consolidated experience focusing on the reduction of deforestation and forest degradation, with, as you said, about $1 billion in donation and a robust portfolio of supported projects. Let us begin now with our first discussion round with our panelists, focusing on livelihoods and rainforest conservation. I would like to our panelists to the tables to start this round, and I would like to start with Osvaldo Stella. Osvaldo, you have worked on topics related to climate change, traditional population and rural settlements. Today, you work with institutions such as the BNDES to initiate new development models in the Amazon region. based on the protection of the rainforest. This is important since rural agrarian reform settlements in the Amazon have been considered partly responsible for deforestation. Considering this, Osvaldo, the question is, how can rural agrarian reform settlements in the Amazon be reconciled with rainforest conservation?
Thank you, Helmut. As we know, the Amazon forest in Brazil is now the main source of expansion and development in the occupation of territory, road paving, hydropower, agribusiness, and so on. These occupations tend to grow on a land-sparing model, where I divide the landscape in productive and conservation areas. From a strictly economic point of view, this model makes great sense for agricultural expansion, for example, especially for commodities, mainly because it maximizes the use of infrastructure and optimizes production costs. On the other hand, the land reform settlements allows us for the expansion of a land-sharing model, an occupation model where we can provide environmental and economical services in the same landscape, producing and preserving over the same area. The inclusion of agrarian settlements in production supply chains can both generate income and help preserve the more than 4 million hectares occupied by the settlement in the Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon today. This process involves several steps from environmental regulation, provision of technical assistance linked to existing credit policies, and most important, local planning for production, reaching institutional markets as a bridge to the open market. With effective environmental regulation and economic inclusion, land reform settlements can and will become generators of both economic and environmental services. This may, in addition, to become protagonists to sustainable development. Settlements can start to play a similar role to that of protected areas and indigenous lands, serving as barriers to deforestation while it houses millions of people in the Amazon region.
Thank you, Osvaldo. I think you showed us the way from land sparing to land sharing. And it was very important that you pointed out that environmental and economic services play the key role for sustainable development in the Amazon. I wonder how Virgilio thinks about it. Virgilio, in your role as the first Secretary of Environment and Sustainable Development for the state of Amazonas from 2002 to 2008, you coordinated the design and the implementation of sustainable development programs like Zona Franca Verde, Bolsa Floresta, and the Climate Change Act of Brazil. During this period, deforestation in the state was reduced by 70% and the area of conservation increased by more than 135%. At the same time, we know that indigenous people, traditional populations, and riverside communities live and subsist on the rainforest. Virgilio, the question, do you think that it is possible to organize a sustainable forest-based economy in the Amazon region that enhances the quality of life and of the local populations? Virgilio.
Good morning, everybody. I think the short answer is yes. I think it is possible. And the second answer is that it's not easy. It's complicated. There is a history of exploitation of extractivist populations by middlemen So there's a semi-slavery tradition with several of these non-timber forest products. But it's doable. Just bring the case of what we're doing now with the support of the Amazon Fund. We have about 2,000 small projects on income generation. We work with 576 communities. And for those of you who are not very familiar with the Amazon, I'm talking about not the whole Amazon, but rather a landscape type which is characterized by riverine traditional extractivist populations. I'm not talking about those areas where Osvaldo was mentioning, which is more related to agriculture and pasture. So for those, there are a number of challenges. Probably the most difficult one is the challenge of logistics, because these areas are very remote, very isolated. And just bring the case of pirarucu management. Pirarucu is a fish which occurs in lakes, and it's possible to manage pirarucu. And we have invested about 600,000 reais per year, so it used to be 300, but now it's more like 200 and 150 with exchange rate. And the output, the gross output, is increasing. It was 200, went to 400, and now last year we had 600,000. So it is increasing, the gross revenues from the management of pirarucu in those lakes. But there is still many challenges. One of the most difficult things is to pay the cost for freezing the pirarucu, because it's far away. So now we're developing new partnerships with the state government here, represented by Governor Melo, with the state university, and with INPA, to develop technologies such as drying pirarucu with good quality, because drying pirarucu is an old technology, but we need to improve it. So I'm just giving you a sense, Helmut, of the type of challenge that we have. And just to add another point, we just did a very interesting survey with the 5% error with 1,400 interviews people, and 67% of those who are benefited by the Bolsa Floresta program have said that their income has increased. So that's very significant. 83% said that life has improved. And this is, again, with 5% error. So it is doable, it's possible, but it's a long way. There are a lot of piuns and carapanãs to be overcome and dealt with.
Virgilio, thank you for your encouraging yes without thinking very much. Virgilio not only advocates that forest-based economies are possible, but with his examples also he gave us the view that they are also successfully broad scalable, if this word in English exists. So now let's come to Adriana. Adriana, you play an important role as a militant, not just for the politics of protection and conservation of the Amazon region, but also for socio-environmental rights and issues, especially those addressing indigenous peoples. Adriana, when it comes to the conservation of the Amazon rainforest, what role do the indigenous people and their territories play in this context?
Good morning. Thanks, Helmut. Thanks for the opportunity of being part of this panel. Well, I think that satellite images and deforestation rates are very clear in terms of saying what's the role of indigenous territories in conserving the forest. Indigenous people have a large repertoire of forest management techniques, and they are responsible for keeping the forest the way we know it today and the way we want to keep it today. All the values of the environmental services that we recognize today are the result of millions and thousands of years of indigenous peoples living in the region. Their traditional knowledge is also, I think, the best partner for science and politics to help in forest conservation. And I think that in the recent years, Brazil has really gone in a good way in terms of developing policies such as the national policy on the management of environmental management of indigenous territories, which are very positive to put the floor so that they can manage their territory in a better way and contribute to this conservation. And that's why also guaranteeing their indigenous rights, their territorial rights, it's a key issue for conservation. And I think that, unfortunately, this is one of their main challenges at the moment in Brazil. So I think that we have to take a look on indigenous territories as an important opportunity for conservation, but also as a challenge, because we cannot see it only as carbon stocks or only as conservation areas, but areas that must guarantee the rights of these peoples so that they can really keep on playing this role they have.
Thank you, Adriana, for highlighting the important role of the indigenous people and territories in stopping deforestation, and also especially stressing the point of the importance of traditional knowledge. That brings us to Amy and her experience and expertise working on analyzing REDD+ initiatives. Amy, since 2010 you have been involved in analyzing the effectiveness, efficiency, equity, and co-benefits of subnational REDD+ initiative in 6 countries. In countries like Brazil, Peru, Cameroon, Tanzania, Vietnam, and Indonesia, as part of CIFOR's global comparative study on REDD+. Considering that CIFOR has conducted this study also on local level in Brazil, I would like to ask you, what are the major findings from these long-term studies, also with focus on the activities of the Amazon Fund? Amy.
Thank you, Helmut and Juliana, for the opportunity to be here. I'll just say that this global comparative study, we worked at 23 sites in these countries with 150 communities and over 4,000 households, and conducted a panel study. So in 2010, kind of when a lot of these activities were getting up, we were in these places and asking about livelihoods and land use, and using different methods, household surveys and village group interviews and women's group interviews, along with remote sensing methods. And then went back in 2014 to the same places to ask the same kinds of questions and do similar measurements. So sort of following this process over time. Some interesting results. One, just accompanying this process, we see this evolution of REDD. It's not what we thought it was going to be. We all know this 5 years ago. It's not this focus on performance-based payments. We've seen a lot of evolution towards jurisdictional approaches, a dependence on and a key role for bilateral funding when these carbon markets did not materialize as we thought they would. This is key. And a policy mix on the ground. When you're on the ground in these places, there are not necessarily cash payments being made. It's a mix of enabling conditions like tenure clarification, the CAR, as Juliana mentioned in Brazil. Command and control is key, along with different kinds of incentives, whether they be conditional or non-conditional. And some good news that we've seen from 2 of the sites actually here on the panel that I want to highlight. In a report that we released with FAS and the Bolsa Floresta program, when you compare some of the sustainable development reserves with Bolsa Floresta and those without, there was a 12% decrease in deforestation where Bolsa Floresta was active. And people are reporting that an increase in well-being that's largely attributed to this program in a very significant way, which is good news. In the Trans-Amazon, in the very early stages of the program, there's a notable decline in deforestation among participating farmers, and those that had participated in a previous program, which is the Pro Ambiente program, which was sort of a payment for environmental service type program, you see even more of a decline, showing the importance of long-term involvement in these kinds of initiatives. Another important finding, maybe globally, is that we're not seeing this sort of elite capture that we maybe could have expected. So we're not seeing that in where there are conditional incentives, it's not that the rich are getting much richer. There are a lot of pro-poor approaches, and when you see income increases, it's the lowest are also benefiting. And so that's really important. Some challenges. Participation, we followed this over time. People are more knowledgeable about, on the ground, they're knowledgeable about these initiatives, but participation is sometimes limited to going to a meeting. and listening to information about the project and not necessarily having an active role in the design. This is not across the board. Of course, this varies, but it's something that we've sort of seen globally. I think it's important to highlight. And when you look at women's participation, it's much lower than men's. And so there is an opportunity for more active participation. And then another maybe red flag for us is this really strong agricultural reliance for both cash and subsistence income in these communities, and an intervention to try and change traditional farming practices that you see, especially in Southeast Asia, but also in the Amazon, turning away from shifting cultivation, and just a concern for what this could do to people's livelihoods and food security if the proper technical assistance is not accompanying this change. Those are some key findings from so far.
Amy, thank you very much, and thank you for portraying, amongst others, the potential benefits and challenges of the REDD+ initiative for us. The very important point, what you mentioned, participation, especially participation of women in this context, we will address in the second round of our discussion forum. Coming to the end of the first round, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome with us the governor of the state of Amazonas, Mr. Mello, and it's and also I would like to highlight, as Juliana already mentioned in her introduction, the importance of the Norwegian government in working together with the Amazon Fund. We have representatives of the Norwegian government, especially in the person of Per, here with us. And for us, it's really a pleasure to have you come and join this forum. Now, as I said, we are halfway through this discussion forum, and I would like to remind you of the opportunity to write down your questions. Our colleagues, Ulla and Esther, are still around to collect them. During the second round, we will discuss local participation and broad scaling of successful models for territorial occupation. We will also talk about tools for results-based program management. Now, Virgilio, the international framework of REDD+ includes the REDD+ safeguards agreed in Cancun in 2010. One of these safeguards refers to the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in the planning and execution of projects. You experience this certainly on a day-to-day basis with your foundation, what you are directing. My question is, Virgilio, how can we ensure the active participation of local communities in projects focusing on sustainable production activities in the forest? Virgilio.
Well, we have a very rich experience on participatory planning. We run about 100 participatory planning workshops per year, and that is over now 8 years. So there's a lot of social technology that has been improved over the course of these experiences. I think the first message is that there is no other way to have a successful story other than doing the participatory planning and evaluation. It has to be done that way. The second message is that it's simpler to be said than to be done. Oftentimes there are participatory workshops that are not very effective, that do not allow people to have an effective and real participation. And there are many sides to this. I don't have the time to go into detail, but I'll just raise the issue of trust. It's very important to have trust, to build trust with the communities, because oftentimes they go to the first workshop, but not to the second one. And we monitor that trust. We develop a number of new indicators. For example, one is the percentage of people who are invited relative to the people that show up. And we monitor that. And it's interesting because the average for 2014, which is a statistic that we have completed, was 104%. So we had more people showing up than were invited, which is interesting. Another indicator is the percentage of women. And we also monitor that, and it's around 39% of women in workshops. In meetings of leaders that we organize twice a year, which are very important, presidents of these associations, the percentage of women has increased a lot. It's now 47%. So I think it's important to quantify different aspects of participation so that it is truly effective. And again, relating to the report that I've just mentioned earlier, this survey, we did an interesting survey in Juma, where Amy reported 12% reduction of deforestation. And in 2011, 60% of the residents said that they believed that the Bolsa Floresta program has resulted in changes in their behavior in terms of deforestation. And in 2014, 90.5% said that their behavior was changed. And a lot of the challenge is to change behavior. So I think the issue of participation has to be measured in many ways, and one of the ways is through these types of indicators. And just to close, a point on the issue of costs. Participation is very expensive, especially in the Amazon. To get people together, to bring them to different places, it's very expensive. Sometimes, just to give you an idea, we have these meetings of leaders that we run twice a year. And for an individual to come from Carauari to Manaus, it takes 1 week by boat. So it's not only the cost in terms of the economics of this, but also it's in terms of the time of the individuals to spend 1 week just traveling, another week there, and so on. So it's about almost a month to go back and forth and do this. So we have to make sure that this investment that communities make in participation has a return to them. And that's the challenge.
Thank you, Virgilio, for this impressive example from the Sustainable Amazon Foundation concerning participation. I took down, you said participation, it's simpler said than to be done. Actually, in the same line, what also Amy said. And for us, it has to be clear that, as you said, participation, especially in the Amazon, is not cheap. So now let's come to Adriana. Adriana, in your first answer, you emphasized the importance of indigenous people for the rainforest conservation. Let me ask you, is it possible to promote a new development model for the Amazon region that takes into account the social and environmental realities of the local populations, including the indigenous people?
We hope so.
Thank you, Adriana. Let's go to the next.
But I think that one important thing, and considering what Virgilio has said about participation, I think that when we talk about indigenous people especially, we are talking about something that goes beyond participation. We are not talking about participation. We are talking about guaranteeing them the way of leading the process of managing their territories. So we have a diversity of indigenous people, a diversity of languages. So when we talk about the discussion on how things are going, and I don't use the word participation, but I think that we have to ask them to participate in their process. We have to respect the language, we have to respect the timing, we have to respect the process of decision making, we have to respect that the definition of the indicators must be done together. Indicators have to have some sense for them. Sometimes we have indicators and results that we design that makes a lot of sense for us, but makes no sense for them, so that's something very important. And we have also to learn from their different ways of using the forest if you want to find this model. Nowadays, for example, our markets only use around 10 to 15 different products from the forest, if we get nuts and oils and things like that. But traditional people and indigenous people manage more than 100 different products. And also, it's very important to recognize that we have to strengthen their own organizations, allow them to manage their process, and reduce the intermediaries, even us, even organizations like mine, I think that our objective is to have to find something else to do because indigenous people are able to do by themselves. And I think this is one of our main challenges. And just to finish the answer, if we want to find this model, we have to be open to innovation, to take risks, to support new approaches and allow creativity. So it's hard to do that when we have to get to the results that were previously established. We have to be open to find new results and find new things. And we need new solutions and new models, so we need also to be open to new ways of doing things.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I think it's good to hear that any development model in the Amazon has to be built on the experience of the local populations. And as Adriana also said, we have to allow for risks. And that is often not very much accepted because every pilot has to be a success. But mostly it is not like this. And also, if you look at the donor side, many donors, they finance projects and they don't think about the risk. And the risks very often are not built in the strategies of project proposals. And this is a very important topic, I think, for all of us. If we do projects, plan projects, think about those risks, what our colleagues already mentioned, and be aware to put them also in your planning. Now, Osvaldo, in your previous answer, you pointed out the need to develop also new models for territorial occupation to reduce deforestation. This leads me to the following question. How can we ensure the implementation on a broad scale of innovative and successful model for territorial occupation in the Amazon? As I said, many of us take the pilot program of the G7 and others. We were focusing on pilots. There were very successful pilots. But the challenge really very often is broad scaling. Osvaldo, your experience working on this topic.
Well, Helmut, what we can see in Brazil is that the conventional models for territorial occupation have not been effective from the point of view and maintaining environmental services and distributing income. In Brazil, for example, this occupation began in the Atlantic rainforest, and now only 10% of it remains. It then went to the tropical savanna, where 50% of the natural cover of the biome now is gone. If there is nothing really new and effective, the fate of the Amazon will be the same. Such a different development model that considers and includes the environment, the people, and the future will not implement alone, nor is the natural course of economic expansion in the region. The need is to create a regional economic matrix that is synergic with the natural and social characteristics of the region, implementing longer economic chains that generate more jobs and create more income for the region, complementing the production of commodities. Sustainable future for this region must rely on every public and private agents as possible, guiding efforts to make and consolidate successful experience that must gain scale through the public policies that already exist and other that can be implemented. Public policies have an important role in this process because they contribute to create the environment that attracts the private capital. Thus we can consolidate a new economic model that fits the local needs and can contribute to as an option to what's taking place in the region now. And when we, as the project we have with the support of Amazon, for example, we work with 2,500 families. It's 0.5% the amount of families in settlements in the Amazon region. But what we already can see is that if you put all the links of this chain together in a region, you can create a cluster that works in a different way. This cluster can be multiplicated and start to develop and scale where public policy, the local interests, and the private capital build a new relation and create different results than what we see nowadays.
Thank you very much, Osvaldo. I think it's very important that you stress the importance of the integration and complementarity of public policies for broad scaling any innovative models, and also the link and the integration between local, private, public policies. It's also an important issue for all the project of the Amazon Fund and all the project actually what are going on, not just in the Amazon. Very often the local view is very scarcely presented in this project proposal. We go mostly, or the institutions very often go to the policymakers, to the leaders, and the local view. Adriana is nodding, so that is, for us, it is certainly a challenge. Now, Amy, we know that very often different projects and environmental programs contribute to one and the same objective. What are the main challenges for monitoring and evaluation of conservation and development initiatives, and how can they be overcome?
Well, I can certainly talk about the challenges and maybe a little bit overcoming them. I mean, I think Virgilio and Adriana already said this. I mean, how do you actually genuinely involve local people in these processes? I mean, especially when we're advocating this jurisdictional approach. You know, I think of these socioeconomic indicators that we collected. I mean, what we did was we were considering this sort of gold standard of impact evaluation, where you really try and have a control and a treatment and all these ways of trying to understand impacts of interventions. I mean, this is not realistic to ask governments, for example, to do. But what do you gain and what do you lose when you sort of scale up? When you use publicly available data, let's say, at the jurisdictional level, well, then you maybe aren't capturing issues of tenure security, issues that women may have in particular. And these are the kinds of things that we're sort of trying to bring to the table with our very detailed study, is not saying you should do this in practice again, but really, okay, if you're using higher level data because it's practically the only solution, you know, where should you be zooming in on the ground to get at some indicators that are critically important, but that you're not going to capture using secondary data? I mean, Brazil's, you know, there's amazingly you know, broad and different kinds of data sources that are available that jurisdictions will use, but there are moments where you're going to have to go to the ground and really talk to people and really trying to understand the impacts of these interventions on their lives and their recommendations for how to adapt these programs. Because in the end, it's the collective land use decisions that are making the broader change. And if you're not actually getting to that level, you won't see the result that you're hoping for higher up, I guess.
Amy, thank you very much for portraying, as you said, the challenges which face impact evaluation and others in this direction. Ladies and gentlemen, Juliana, dear panelists, thank you for this first round of the second round of questions, and I would like to invite you for applause before we go to your questions for all the panelists having answered and discussed important issue which actually we face in the day-to-day work in the Amazon. We hope these two rounds established an understanding for the purpose of the Amazon Fund to contribute to a sustainable development model for the Amazon region, And now we are looking forward to have the panelists discussing your questions, which we have collected in the meantime. And I would like to invite you, if somebody still has questions, Esther and Ulla still gonna walk around and collect them. And let me cite the first question. This is a question what is addressed to all the panelists. And it is about costs of deforestation. The question is, how much did it cost to reduce deforestation by 80%? Who paid for it? What role did the Amazon Fund play in it? How much did it cost to reduce deforestation by 80%? Who paid for it? What role did the Amazon Fund play? Adriana?
I don't know how much it costs in terms of money. I know how much it costs in terms of political decision, in terms of political will. I think that that was the most important cost that we paid for, and that Brazil, when took this decision, started to look at deforestation as a broader issue, and started to talk about integrated policies and not only about environmental policies. I think that's the main important things, and that's the main challenge. It's to keep this view, and to guarantee that we will still have to do this in a way that everybody must be committed to. In terms of the Amazon Fund, well, I think that as a results-based fund, it has a different role, because Brazil has started the Amazon Fund in the process of already being reducing it. So the Amazon Fund is important to keep it and to keep on going to the future. But the relation between what the Amazon Fund is doing now and the reduction that was done is the results that allowed us to create the fund.
Yes, I agree with Adriana, as Amazon Fund is a payment for performance-based fund. But each project we support, we agree with the applicant and we build together a logical framework that brings to the project a measurement of indicators that will we can identify the results implemented. And of course, since the main objective of the Amazon Fund is the reduction of the deforestation, one of the indicators is related to the deforestation rates of the specific area in territory the project is acting. So we can see, based on the activities that has been implemented, and we have this in our annual report, that each project significantly contributes to the area it acts, and we also monitor in terms of municipality and in terms of the areas in the state that the projects are located. So we could see, for example, deforestation rates since the Amazon Fund has been created up to 2014 has decreased 33%. Is all related to the Amazon Fund? Of course not, but certainly the projects that we support, if they were not there, deforestation rates would be, the reduction would be higher or lower. We expect and we consider that the projects really have an important participation in that deforestation rate.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Juliana, Virgilio is keen to...
Well, I think that's a very interesting and complicated question. Who was responsible to reduce deforestation? And I think the honest answer is that we don't know. We don't know exactly who was responsible for what percentage. There's a particularity in Brazil, which is the fact that the deforestation data is collected at the federal level. So it's INPE, the National Space Agency, that processes this data. And it's the Minister of Environment that makes the announcement. So to the general public, the impression is that the good results or the bad results are derived from federal policies, which is not true, because states have a very important role. Civil society has a very important role. And Individuals also, as at the individual level, have important role. Companies have an important role. I'll just raise one actor who is not here in this table, which is Greenpeace. Greenpeace, with the roundtable on the soybean moratorium, was very important to reduce deforestation. So I think we should look at this as a complex factor. But to relate this to the Amazon Fund, yes, the Amazon Fund is contributing since its implementation to this. In our case, in the landscapes where we operate, the results of Amazon, that processes the data of INPI for us, it's that deforestation is 50% lower in protected areas where we implement the Bolsa Floresta program in comparison with protected areas in the state of Amazonas where this program is not implemented.
Thank you,
so we can
Virgilio.
say that there is a direct consequence.
Thank you, Virgilio, for your comments. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Juliana. Now let's come to the next question from you. So far, it is a question about the private sector. So far, the vast majority of financial support comes from public sources. Why do you think this is the case, and what can be done to increase private contributions?
I think it's for me. Well, I think that even if most of the finance come from public sources, as BNDES, for example, it is guided by the private logic. It's not, it should be, but it's not every time that it happens, that the public policies is oriented to in the way that creates what we used to call sustainable development. In the Amazon, what we can observe nowadays is that if we fix the public policies that we already have there, it can create a business environment better to the private capital, reducing the transaction costs, if I can say like this, because we have money, funds linked to result based in terms of environment available for the Amazon, but the money is stuck because they can't find entrepreneurs, people to finance. Then it's crucial to create a new environment for business in the Amazon that permit the private capital to invest in a different model of development in the region.
Thank you very much, Osvaldo. Are there some other comments, Virgilio?
Well, just two thoughts. We as Amazonas Sustainable Foundation, we're funded mostly by the private sector. So about 70% of our budget comes from private investment. And these are mostly Brazilian donors. The Bradesco Bank, then companies such as Samsung and others based in Brazil. No, these are Brazilian companies. There's a big challenge now in Brazil for Brazilian philanthropy, because foreign philanthropy is moving out of Brazil, and domestic philanthropy is not increasing at the same rate. So there's a big crisis in philanthropy. So this is a very important issue to be tackled. Second point that occurs to me in relation to the private sector is that we need to encourage the industry that processes biodiversity. And here, I think we have a very important agenda with the phytotherapies, what is it? Phytopharmaceuticals and phytocosmetics, or biocosmetics. Because these are two industries that we should really have private sector investment on, and we yet don't have that at the scale that is needed. So pointing to the private sector and trying to make forests worth more than cut, I think these are two sectors that would be very, very essential to be encouraged in one way or another.
Okay. Thank you very much, Virgilio. We have another question to Adriana. Over many decades, industrial land clearing marginalized indigenous peoples. How is Brazil reconciling competing land claims? How is the Amazon Fund positioned to assist?
Well, we are living, I think that we are the main challenge of indigenous lands rights at the moment, with almost thousands, almost 100 of propositions to change the legislation, changing the constitution and the legislation. And I think that there's still a lot of prejudice from many sectors thinking that indigenous people are in the past and that they should evolve and that they should come to our level of development. I think that the Amazon Fund has an important role in supporting indigenous people's way of managing the forests so that we can show the world and the Brazilian politicians and the private sector that indigenous people have their way of living and developing and that they should be supported to live in their way so that we can guarantee their rights as our contribution to a better society. So it's a huge challenge at the moment, but I think that the Amazon Fund has a real issue to do in this.
Thank you very much, Adriana. We have a question now to Juliana. The question is, could you give us an idea what is the percentage of the project submitted to the Amazon Fund that are approved? In Brazil, small communities say that it is not possible to access the financial resources from the Amazon Fund. Can you give an answer to this?
Yes, the steering committee of the Amazon Fund has decided that the support of the fund to projects has to follow two modalities, I would say. The first one is the support for structuring projects. What does structuring projects mean? It means that the project has to have an impact in the territory, it has to be linked to a public policy, and has to be resolutive in the diagnosis problem itself. So in that circumstances, usually smaller projects do not access the fund as they are not qualified as structuring projects. What we have decided in COFA, and I say we because BNDES is only one seat in the whole committee, so we have 24 people, representatives discussing the dynamics and how Amazon Fund should act, is to select smaller projects through a call to submission process. So we agree, the committee established a group of specialists. Some of them usually representatives from the steering committee, and they decide what will be the criteria to select projects, including the gradings, the evaluation, and what projects are desired to be implemented. So this was one of the examples of the call to submission we had early this year to select projects to implement the indigenous policy in the indigenous territories. So we selected what we wanted to see, what the indigenous peoples wanted to see, because we have one representative from the indigenous peoples in the steering committee. So they didn't want anymore the plans. They want the plans implemented. So one of the important criteria to select those projects in the call to submission we had this year was that at least 70% of the activities of the project that were being submitted had to be related to the implementation of the indigenous territory plans. So this is one example. Another strategy that's shown appropriate is the support through partners. So we have institutions, stronger institutions with robust governance that are very linked to local communities and are linked to local institutions. So what we've been seeing is that through these institutions, through these partners, we can reach the ground. ground. And we have the number based on the indicators, and as we consolidate through these partners, we have reached 1,200 small institutions. And in considering the smaller entrepreneurs, as Virgilio said, that we have leaders in the communities, we have the number of 55,000 smaller entrepreneurs. So we do believe that we are reaching the ground. We might not have been supporting the small, tiny institution directly, but we are reaching them through our partners and through this strategy of the call to submission. So.
Thank you, Juliana. Question to all of the panelists regarding carbon rights. Who owns the carbon in the Amazon?
God.
Adriana.
In the indigenous territories, certainly indigenous peoples.
Somebody else? Virgilio?
This is another complicated question. Well, theoretically, it should go to those who own the land or those who do the job of reducing deforestation, or could be a combination of these two. In Brazil, so far, the national view, the national policy, is that this belongs to the federal government. So the federal government is the only one allowed to make international transactions through the Amazon Fund. That's the only existing mechanism. The state governments have been fighting to get a slice of this. There are methodologies for doing this, what's called a nested approach, that you can link states, and then within states, different territories. But these are only, say, theoretical exercises that have been done by researchers, NGOs, and so on. This has not been transformed into policies. And in my view, I think it would be very interesting to have something which would begin as a domestic market for carbon. I was actually discussing this morning with Gabriel on this. I think would be very interesting, maybe for the Amazon Fund to do something similar to what was done by the World Bank with FCPF many years ago. So that could be a way of developing that, but it's still we don't have it. So that is something that needs to be done in the next, I don't know, years, months.
Thank you, Virgilio. Sorry to interrupt. The French TV5 just wrote a message. They want a final word of all of you, the panelists. So please, the final word to TV5. Let's start with Adriana. Word, or at least, or a small sentence. TV5.
I would say that it's very easy to discuss climate change in Paris with this weather, and that if all of us go to the Amazon region and feel the weather inside indigenous territories at the moment, especially in Xingu, in between the deforestation area, we would get into a result easily.
Thank you, Adriana. Osvaldo?
Well, I would share this message with people that is negotiating the climate agreement in Le Bourget, that we have to do what we need to do because our sons trust us.
Thank you, Osvaldo. Virgilio?
I think we should say that the Amazon Fund is a very good experience that should be a source of inspiration to others. I think oftentimes people say that the Amazon Fund is bureaucratic and so on, but I don't think it is. On the contrary, I think compared to the World Bank, to the United Nations agencies, and many United Nations agencies, the Amazon Fund is much more efficient. So I think it should be seen as a good example, good success story. Not to say that it can be improved. Of course, everything can be improved. But I think it's a good success story. And it's especially important that we need to have success stories to act quickly. So that's my message.
Amy?
I guess my message is to value what has happened at the subnational level, to support it, to value it. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the lessons are. And for policymakers at higher levels to maybe not feel threatened by that, actually take some of these lessons and learn from them at higher levels, decision making.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of our session. Juliana Santiago will close this session forum with a short wrap-up, and then we'll present we can present the video, what you already presented, because most of you didn't see it. So if somebody wants to stay longer, we have a very nice video. What the early comers saw, we can present it again.
Okay. Okay. So we had here today an interesting round of discussions on forest conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity resources. It has been very clear that indigenous peoples are an important part of conserving our tropical forests. At the same time, it was noted that the increase of the general populations, including the number of settlements in the Amazon region, has been followed by paved roads, by hydroelectric plants, and the expansion of agribusiness and other activities with corresponding loss of forest cover. So it was also pointed out that new tropical development model must be designed and implementing, allowing social, economic, and environmental prosperity coexist in the Amazon as a result of joint actions to promote conservation of the forests, environmental regularization, and economic inclusion. It was noted that the integration of projects, policies, and programs monitoring is a strategic part of the process, allowing the identification of the most successful initiatives as well as other learnings, and also that the proper communication of the results and impacts to different stakeholders is what legitimates these initiatives and secures continued support from donors and from the public in general. Finally, we had the opportunity to share with you some of the Amazon Fund's experiences as an innovative financial mechanism for REDD+. As we have seen here today, the Amazon Fund supports forest conservation projects that implement actions ranging from the monitoring of deforestation by satellite to the structuring on the ground of biodiversity production chains. The fund's support also encompasses the promotion of greater efficiency in the use of the land, so that the rural economic may also protect the environment, an alliance of rural production with the environmental protection. We believe that reducing deforestation goes beyond the climate agenda and the reduction of the systemic economic risk associated with rising global temperatures. We believe that reducing deforestation also means sustainable development, with social inclusion and respect for other forms of life that share this planet with us. So I would like to thank you for taking your time and being with us this morning. Thank you.
That this session worked as it worked was very much the work of Angela, of Ulla, and of Esther. And we are very happy also that the organizers helped us to get these cocktail tables in, because otherwise we would have been sitting on this chair, so everybody cooperated. Thank you very much, and enjoy your coffee break. Thank you.
The Amazon is one of our most important environmental assets. It encompasses the largest hydrographic basin in the world. It is home to rich biodiversity, and it plays a crucial role in the rain patterns on our continent and in the climatic balance on the planet. Some 25